Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Scott Clover. Scott, thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And as always, Scott, I'm going to start with arguably the hardest question on the planet. Scott, in your own words, what makes you a man?
What makes me a man? I guess you probably ask all your guests this question. It's an amalgam. It's an amalgam of my body, my sensitivities, my reactions, and also how people react to me. I think masculinity is a lot of what we project out in the world. So in quantum physics, they say reality changes when it's observed. And so I think a lot of what makes me a man is not just what I look like or my genitalia, but maybe my beard or the tone of my voice or my Adam's apple. That's a physical characteristic, but also society has sort of dictated that that's what I am. So I live up to what's expected of the general masses to some degree. And then in my case, I veer off from that in different contingencies, depending on who's perceiving it. Right. But I don't question that. I was born in 1970. So it was a pretty binary when I was growing up. And that's changed a lot in the last couple of decades for myriad reasons. A lot of it is the food and medications and the water and the things that they're changing our physiology. And so we can't catch up genetically because we're still in that same genetic period of your great grandmother, for example. So, the egg that made you was in your grandmother. So there's no way to change that genetic coding very quickly. But yet all the chemicals and the radiation and the EMFs and the polyesters and the things that we put on our bodies change how our genes express themselves. So what makes me a man? As I said, it's an amalgam of all of those things.
It's a question I ask all my guests because I think it's a question that should be asked. You like you say, you're born in the 70s. It wasn't asked, and I think we're of an age now where it's okay to ask, and I think it's really important to ask because it's changed from, like you say, that binary response of what it was into something new and something interesting. So a little bit of a segue and a little bit of a story behind me and Scott. So Scott, I asked to come on the podcast, and he suggested that we do a session before I did the podcast with him. But I'm going to let him explain a little bit more about what it is he does, and then we can sort of go into a bit more depth of how that happened and how it works, essentially. So, Scott, what is it that you do?
So I'm an intuitive energy healer, which means I see and sense energy patterns. And that can be in an organization, in a manuscript, but mostly in my work day to day, it's with individuals. And that energy frequencies or patterns can exist from their generational background, their genetics, their epigenetics means what's happened to them since birth. A lot of times we find a pattern that happened in utero, something happened to the mother, and that affected the baby inside. A lot of times it's things that affect the grandfather or the father in the family, then that gets passed down, say, into the son or the daughter and the mother, etc. And that can cross genders. It doesn't have to be specific. But it's very interesting to see family patterns for me and then explain them back to my clients. I explain most things back in metaphor, and particularly metaphors that the client understands. So the intuitive part for me is I have a very honed intuition. I see and sense patterns, not just empathy, but as I said, organizational patterns, how energy is either kinked in your hose. My clients call me the energetic plumber. So I generally can see and sense where in the body you might have coagulated energy or a story that's built up. And most of the stories that I help people deal with are before the age of 7, because after the age of 7, the subconscious is fully formed. But the subconscious isn't formed before the age of 7. That's why a lot of people say, I don't remember my childhood so well. Or you see a lot of young kids who are very intuitive, or they're talking to little spirits or things like that. They're on a different wavelength. And then once our subconscious forms, we sort of lose that magic connection. Well, for some of us like me, I didn't lose it. My intuition stayed to the point that I had to shut it down. And so I was very intuitive as a kid, and I shut that down in middle school because I didn't want to be weird and different. And then it came back to me in midlife with a vengeance, and I couldn't deny it anymore. So once I realized I had these abilities, I studied and went to different workshops and classes and met with experts and had several mentors to try and figure out how I could best utilize it to help people. And so in my case, I'm an intuitive energy healer because I see and sense patterns in people, and then I explain them back to the person dealing. And then on my level, I use somatic exercises, ways you feel into your own body and feel maybe aligned or not aligned in your body. And I can help you find those places and then alleviate those for you. Meaning I don't do the work, you do the work. I'm just the librarian. I'll guide you to what needs to be done and then guide you to how to do it, but you're going to ultimately do it. A lot of like spiritual healers or people like that impress energy onto people. That's generally not my go-to. That may happen very infrequently, but generally I'm the observer and the guide because I find it more effective for the individual to understand their pattern and heal themselves. If it's healed by someone else, it's more likely to come back. But if you're involved not only in the process, but 90% involved in the process, then you know it happened. It was real for you. You can't a week later say, did that really happen or not? Because you experienced it yourself. And that's where I think my work is slightly different than some other people that might have a similar nomenclature. But my goal is to help you uncoagulate balled up or blocked energies, emotions, physical traits. So if something physical is in your body, it's because there's energy tangled up on an energetic level, and then the physical becomes made by those patterns of energy that are maligned.
Yeah. So let's go back to the sort of the beginning of that, because that was quite interesting, where you said it's from your grandparents and sort of comes through that, and there's a lot of learned behaviors, and that's sort of a debate is like breaking cycles and things like that. So what, again, a lot of our listeners are probably cycle breakers in the sense that they are unhappy in their sort of their life and their scenarios and things that are happening that have happened in the past. So they just want to sort of break away from that, whether that's addiction or maybe looking to sort of push themselves even further forward in life and sort of grow from that side. So explain, well, if you can, how that happens and what's the difference sort of from learned behaviors and energies and that side of things, or are they linked?
They're definitely linked. Patterns are passed down generationally through families, through societies or communities. You know, Italians are very Italian, and, you know, an Asian family is going to treat their children differently than a Polish family is going to treat their children. I can say that the patriarchy and some of those old world beliefs is starting to quake in these last two generations. And that's what's turning everything on its ear. It's not only just the physical, it's coinciding with breaking of these generational patterns, as you said, or these familial or first chakra tribal patterns, let's call them. A lot of us, as you said, pattern breakers, you have to break away from the tribe. And when you do that, that's a first chakra, base, pelvic area. Once you do that, it goes up into your genitals and then up into your power center and then up into your communication center, which is your throat. Those patterns have to be observed. And once they're observed, they can be changed. But if you go on the sake that you're just trying to overcome something without analyzing it, you're going to be less likely to get over it. And one thing, if your listeners, if they consider themselves a winner, this is one of the, excuse my French, but this is one of the mind fucks that I've found out about trying to break a generational pattern, is if you consider yourself a winner, you were conditioned to win, okay? But you were conditioned to win by what under your family or grandparents' terms or your mom and dad's terms. So to become a pattern breaker, as you said, you have to fail. You have to fail at what was expected of you. You have to fail at what was told to you to succeed at between the ages of 1 and 7. You have to abandon that so you can win at being yourself. Now, most people don't see it from that perspective. They want to do both. And it's really unlikely that you're going to feel contented by having one foot in both of those realities. You eventually may feel like you're being split in half. So it's not screw my family, I don't want to have anything to do with them. It's no, I can't be what they expected of me to be because I am myself. We are all, in my work, I consider us all mandalas. Do you know what a mandala is? It's like a symmetrical design, say in India. And I think of them as like a stained glass window. Each of us is a stained glass window. Well, we shine differently. If your soul light shines through your stained glass differently than your sisters or your brothers, different things should be expected of you. And if you were born or raised to follow in your father's footsteps, then you have to fail at that in order to succeed at being yourself. And most people can't stride those two things and feel contented inside themselves. So you can still love your parents and you can still honor your family, but you have to let go of what was expected of you from their perspective so you can thrive at what you are. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. It's really interesting. So I basically had this conversation with my mum the other day in regards to what they perceive as success. So she was saying that because she grew up in a nice house in a nice area, her idea of success is slightly better than that, but not like crazy better than that. And everything below that is quite a big failure. And I think with the growth of the internet and this sort of stuff, she's probably the last generation where it's just you just sort of followed on from your parents' footsteps, whereas now it's a lot
Exactly.
more common to sort of to break away. But it was, yeah, it was an interesting conversation that it was like success to me is literally just one step up. Like they, for argument's sake, they lived in a semi-detached. I have to live in a detached. They had one car. I need two. It's only one step, and that was what she would see as success. And the reason that we had this conversation was because my uncle had just bought a house, but it's a great house and it's all these things, but it wasn't perceived as success to him because it wasn't better than his parents, which is literally what you're saying. It's like you have to fail to break free. Um, but I guess that's the hard bit, right? Because a lot of people sit in that failure. So what would you suggest to people listening as the next step? So you can fail, but a lot of people sit in that, and that's where I guess depression and those sort of things sort of
Mm-hmm.
manifest and grow. So what's the next step for people once they've essentially failed?
One of the main things I learned from my mentor is accept existing realities. If you can look at your reality and accept it for what it is, your situation for what it is, then you can change it. If you wish or want it or need it to be different, it's going to be needed and wanted to be different continually. So accept the existing reality. Have a real nice mirror look chat with yourself, with your friends, however you need to face what's going on with you or where you came from or who you are inside. And that's how you express yourself. Do the clothes you wear, are they expressive of the kids you grew up around and that became your style because it was their style? And now that you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, do you not wear a certain color because it was perceived of this or that, or a team that you're into or not into? Like, how do you express yourself? And if you take away the judgment from other people and start accepting your reality for who and what you are, then you're able to change it. So one of the cornerstones of my work is accepting the existing reality. And the second part is joy and judgment can't live in the same moment. So that example of, oh, I bought a house that's 25 square meters less than my uncle. And so now that's a judgment that you just imposed on yourself. And now you can't enjoy the joy of your house, even though it has a better view or a better deck, or it's 15 minutes closer to work. Find the joy in what you've experienced or what you're putting your energy into. If you look at your life through the lens of other people, that's judgment. When you are judging yourself or feeling judged by others or allowing other people to judge you, that ratchets up your nervous system. So a lot of children today and young adults are having ratcheted up nervous systems for no reason at all except they're checking their phones. Well, on their phones is that girl with bigger boobs or that guy with bigger calves or that dude with a Lambo. I see that guy on the things. I just want to oh my God. Like, that is a judgment. He gets in that car and feels judged. And so he's not in alignment with who he truly is, right? It's judging yourself by the perception of others. And that our society is eroding us away as individuals. At the same time that we're leaving a tribal community and becoming individualistic, meaning a lot of these families you've heard of, my great grandmother had 12 brothers and sisters or 8 brothers and sisters, or these Catholic families or different families that, had broods of children. That's because they had a farm and they needed those kids to work on the farm. Or they had a leather shop and they needed their kids to help in the leather shop or the bakery or whatever it was. Well, now we don't live our lives that way. So we no longer have a family tribal community. So where the individual is coming out and the family unit is eroding because we don't eat dinner together and you don't pack animal the way we used to as tribal families, if you will. So that's changing, as I said, all in the matter of a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep up. So if you start thinking and you wake up in the morning, I have to perceive myself how my grandma does and my mom and my dad and my brother's a jerk, so he's going to say this to me, and then I got to go to work, and that girl I like, maybe she doesn't like the shirt I'm wearing. All of these things just build up and build up and build up to the point that you're putting your life into the opinions of others. Now I'm going to reiterate this: joy and judgment can't live in the same moment. So if you can find joy in what you're wearing, what you're driving, where you're living, find the joy in it and let go of the judgment from yourself, from others. It's going to calm your nervous system down to some degree. And also you're going to just feel better about who you are.
I really love that sentence. You said it to me during our session, which was, it sort of unlocked a few things and sort of made me rethink about different things, which is, it's a nice way of putting it. Joy and judgment can't live in the same space, which is, it's a fun way of thinking about it, because it's really simple. Like when you say that, it's like you focus on you and you can be happy. Focus on others, then you've created judgment, so you can't. And the other thing you're right about is that it's the 10 to 20 years we've almost gone through 3 generations of shift. Like technology has advanced so quickly that we're just in this weird world where tech's so advanced, yet we've only gone through 2 generations in that time frame, and we're hundreds of years ahead of where we were, in inverted commas, compared to 100 years from now. 100 years ago, compared to now is, if you explain that to that person, your grandma or your great grandma, their head would probably fall off the way that we sort of live our lives now. So there is that to deal with as well. And when you say that we're no longer in a tribal, like a family tribe, I personally think that with the growth of connection and the growth of the internet and that sort of thing, we've almost become a tribe of 8 billion. Like we've literally become connected to pretty much everyone in the world. And that brings in so much more pressures and so much more judgment and that sort of thing, which was originally it was keeping up with the Joneses, and now it's keeping up with the Kardashians, because you literally can see, like you said, someone driving a Lamborghini, someone on a yacht, the girl with the bigger boobs, and the guy with the bigger calves, which I did enjoy. That's a funny one. But yeah, it's all there. What I would love to talk about, if you're okay talking about this next, is mine and your session.
Sure. So I start with a couple of basic questions. Since I don't advertise, I ask, how did you find me? Generally, it's things like this that people find me, and they generally say, oh, I didn't know I needed this until afterwards. Like, I'm glad I found you, or something drew me to you because of what you said or the type of conversation you had. I'm non-dogmatic. So I don't bring some sort of spirit into the room. I bring energy, or not, or try to get energy to move, right? So how a session starts is I ask, I think, 8 or 9 basic questions and they seem random to the receiver, but to me, they focused on a little aspects of different parts of your life. And when I ask those questions, I sense your energy field and inside your body and notice what pings, what tightens up, where your breath might change. And I noticed that intuitively. You and I were on the telephone. We weren't doing Zoom, right? Um, and I sense that pattern in my head, like a second sight, if you will, or a hologram that I see. And then part of your body lights up, and I take note of that. And then the session starts because of maybe what I've noticed in the 8 or 9 basic questions. And those questions relate to how and where you grew up, your family dynamics, your relationship status, where your people are from, meaning do you have a tribal connection that you're trying to see your life through? And then the last question is, were you a C-section baby, or was someone in your family a C-section baby? Because the bond between the C-section mother and the baby is different than the bond to a baby who was birthed vaginally. And then from there, as I said, I ask you, the client, is there something specific, a reason why you called? I'm trying to get over an ex-lover, or my mother was narcissistic, or my brother was a bully. You know, there's a lot of people come to me with very specific things they want to deal with. And then other people say, no, I just have an actual malaise, or I just don't feel in my body, or there's a depression where I'm not in alignment. And I'd like you to, help me figure that out. And generally from just that first 3 or 4 minutes, we can fill at least the first hour and then some, because I will notice certain patterns. Either they happen to you in adolescence, but primarily it's a pattern that started, as I said, before the age of 7, that you may not even be aware or cognizant of. And a lot of times people go to talk therapy and they tell you their story in the moment. Well, a 35-year-old telling the same story about how they were bullied when they were 9 has been told 30 years and rehashed in different ways. And the brain has a way of placating that story to make you feel better. Well, you're telling a placated story, which means it's changed from the originating story, which means it's hard to solve the issue or let go of it because you're looking at it from a different perspective. It's like watching a remake of a movie. You're not watching the original. I help people find the originating kink or the originating factors or trauma that happened. And then we go from there and finding ways and somatically to have it release in the body.
Yeah,
Does that help?
Yeah, no. So again, for me, it was all new, and it was, again, I've shared this story countless times. I actively avoided therapy because I felt that it was something that I could do on my own, and that it was something that I wanted to do on my own. And I have now gone through all this, and therapy is something that I consider and talk about to myself, but still haven't sort of taken the plunge. But what I did find, and what I sort of enjoyed about it, was that it was different, which I think is something that's really important, because, like you say, talking therapy and that sort of thing is what's talked about and is given as an option, whereas this was something different. But also, as a man, and something that I've found for a lot of men, is that we like to find our own solutions, and we like to not necessarily pretend, but we like to come up with the solution. And I think with talking with you and doing that session, it was very much geared towards doing something, and rather than just talking about it, which is traditional talking therapy, right? So that was what I found that was both different and sort of enjoyable about it, shall we say.
Yeah, and what aspect did you find about it, like, somatically? Somatics is the other offshoot of my work, and that's where the intuitive side and the somatic side merge in the work. Is, what did you see or sense in your body, for example?
Yeah, I mean, you can feel things happening. You can feel yourself.
Well, say I. Say I.
He's going again. He's got me going again. I felt like it was that there was something was happening, and you could tell when I was maybe fighting a response, and sort of that you could see yourself unlocking it. And there's levels to this, right? So you can believe in it full-heartedly, and you can go, this is what I truly believe is happening. I truly believe that there's all of this energy being manipulated and moved around, or you can look at it from a very base level, which is just, I'm talking through this and I can tell when I'm not fully truthful with myself, because and because you're in that immersive space and you're forced to do it, you can tell, like, you can tell when you're twisting things and changing things.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's you want to go full believer in that side of things, or you want to look at it from a more pragmatic point of view, I think both have space and both have truth to them. And yeah, like I felt that there was conversation that I hadn't had with myself for a while, and it was good to have. But I think what was really important, and why I would suggest potentially considering it or potentially looking at something similar, is the conversation didn't end. It wasn't just a case of let's sit in it. It was a conversation of like, what are we doing? And there was an active sort of bit in the middle that I don't know if you want to talk about, Scott, where I was essentially coughing out the energy. Now, for some people, you might be like, "You're a crazy fool. What are you doing, coughing in your own bedroom for on command of a man on the other end of a phone?" But again, it's that putting yourself in that position and actually moving things up and having that self conversation, but actively doing something about it, which makes it better, essentially.
Yes, and the coughing in your case, it was located in a certain part of your body, and so it wanted to be released. The easiest way to release it was out your mouth, right?
Yes.
Some people release energy, they transmute it, they shift it, and we send it into the sun. It really has a lot to do with how it got trapped in your body. Was it a physical trauma? Was it an emotional trauma? Was it a tribal trauma? Was it something your family instilled in you? Or was it something you asked for when you were a kid for safety or protection, that as you grew out of it, it stayed the same? And so that becomes adversarial over time, because you've got a little pockets of your inner child running around your body wreaking havoc on a man. There's a lot of that goes around. So people might think of them as demons in some ideologies or faiths or religions. I see them more as little segments of your subconscious that split off to protect you, that over time just sort of rotted. You got forgotten about. If you put a cookie in your laundry and you leave it there for a year, something's going to be bad about it, right? So if you leave a little section of your subconscious to protect you at 4, 5, 6, 7, even 9, 10, and it breaks off and stays there, it doesn't grow up, but you grew up around it. And so it can rear its head and make you seem or feel childish, even though it's happening to the man that you are, and you have no explanation of what just happened. It's because it wasn't resolved, or it hadn't grown up. Or a lot of my work is explaining to clients that if something didn't exist in your household, you have to, as an adult, teach it to yourself. So if your family didn't have self-worth, or a connection to money that was fruitful, or whatever you feel like one of your dinks or one of your kinked hoses is, if you look at the existing reality and you say, wow, my mom and dad didn't have that, that means you didn't learn it in your house. It's not you let the muscle atrophy, it's you never had the muscle in the first place. So you have to build it. You have to recognize and be honest with who you are and where you came from, and say, wow, my parents didn't understand gratitude. And so now you feel like you're a selfish prick. But deep down, you're not. It's just you forgot. It's not that you didn't forget how to connect to gratitude. It's just it was never presented to you as an option. So if you learn gratitude as an adult, or any facet of emotional stability, if you look and say, my grandpa didn't have that, my father didn't have that, my brother didn't have that, if none of the men in your family had spines, and you grow a spine, you're going to be different from them, and they're going to somehow cast you out, right? Not maybe physically, but they're going to energetically separate you because you're breaking away from the pattern. But also, you have to grow the spine yourself. That's a bit of a stretch, but every family is not, 100%. Every parent is not a complete person, just the way we aren't yet.
Yeah.
So expecting more from your parents than they were capable of is a real downer, and it'll keep you down. But if you accept the existing reality and say, wow, my parents weren't capable, or my grandmother was so awful that it made my mom, self-loathe.
Yeah.
That if your grandma was such a bitch that your mother has no self-worth, then you're going to have to teach it to yourself, or your uncle, to your father, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The patterns come from both parents. But
It's
if there's, go ahead.
no, I was going to say it's such a truth, like it's such a dynamic, and you see a lot of people and like history repeating itself and these sort of things. And yeah, I think there's a skill to it, right? Like being able to teach yourself these things. Where do you think that comes from? Where do you think that drive comes from, or is it just purely intuition and these sort of things? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I like talking about intuition because it's my job. I mean, I use it for my job, but also I help my clients touch and expand and understand their intuition. A lot of my clients pick up too much. I can tell you, in my family, my grandfather had it and my father had it. My grandfather drank from the minute he woke up to the minute he went to sleep because it just wasn't talked or accepted. And he must have been hearing a whole bunch of crazy shit. And my dad in the 80s had to go on nerve pills. I don't know what they're called back then, but that was almost unheard of back then because he was picking up and oversensitized. And when I realized it was happening to me, I thought, well, that is not the route I want to go. I want to figure this out for myself and channel it into a way that helps people. And that's what I'm doing now. So to answer your question, how do people deal with it in their own right? Another aspect, and I have my own podcast if people are interested. I have one episode called Detachment is Connection, or Embodiment and Detachment, something like that. So one of the things I teach about is detachment is connection. And yes, that sounds oxymoronic. But what I mean is, if you detach more and more from the ideologies and principles that sort of maligned you or made you malleable as a kid, and your clay formed on the imposition of others, what we call conditioned thinking, societal beliefs, peer pressure, principles of schools, universities, things like that, religion, that's conditioned thinking. And when that impresses you and confines you into molding yourself into something, and you let that go, then you can expand to be who you really are from the inside. And so what I call that is, it's detachment is connection. Detaching from the belief system that you had to be this, that, and the other thing, or a certain thing to be successful or to fit in, when all you really sort of yearn for is to just be yourself. So I've been teaching authenticity since like the mid 90s, I think, in college. And authenticity has changed a lot. And what I like now is, not only do I help people find what authenticity is, but we can guide people to aligning with their authenticity. Telling the truth is great, but acting on it is even better, right?
Yeah.
So if you let go of some of these stories that created parts of you that you don't like, then you have a chance to sort of embolden and embellish the parts that exist. And for a lot of men now, that's a verging of sexuality. What does sexuality mean? Right? Not just to you, but your partner. And I can tell you, we mentioned at the beginning, I was born in 1970. All my friends growing up, and my girlfriends and friends, like female friends in high school, they were taught, society taught them that sex was done to them. And so now all of a sudden they're 30 and they have a vibrator and they want to enjoy sex. And then they say to you, I want to be touched a certain way. And you're like, well, that's not the way I grew up. And then it throws a kink in the whole thing. So it's about detaching from what maybe your peers thought or porn thinks of sex, and how does your body want to respond? And then saying to your partner, how do you want to be touched? And asking them, not as opposed to how do I want to, the male side, how do I want to penetrate you? We are all masculine and feminine energies. The yin yang symbol is iconic for a reason. It's because it's everywhere. We all have masculine and feminine energies inside of us. Now, is that genitals? No, it's giving and receiving. Masculine is more the right side of our body. What are we putting out in the world? And the left side is more, what are we receiving? And if you're more balanced in that, just like a business has cash flow in and out, if you have camaraderie or reciprocity of what you are giving and what you are receiving, you're going to feel more whole. And that's just in your own mind, not being perceived of by anyone else, or in your own bedroom with your partner. If there's open communication there, then that creates trust. And then you can have more, I guess, intimacy, which is another word that sort of men shy away from because it seems emasculating. As opposed to saying to your girlfriend, hey, I really like being touched this way, or show her how you masturbate because that really is, you know how to do it. So it's really about just reciprocity of our energies, and what
Yeah,
are you giving and what are you receiving? Does that make sense?
it does. Yeah, and I guess sort of the next thing I want to talk about is, say someone's listening to this and they sort of go, yeah, I might try something like this. What is there an exercise or something that they can sort of start to think about or talk about?
Oh,
What's the sort of intro to this? What is something that someone can do at home to make them sort of get involved with this?
breathe into your pelvis. Spend 90 seconds breathing into your perineum, which is, the colloquial expression is your taint, but your perineum is your pelvic floor. Try to see if you can get the energy or the breath all the way down through your body. And if it stops at your diaphragm, or it stops in your abdomen, or it stops, above your pelvis, you know that there's some sort of contractive energy there. Well, there's a story there. Can you figure out on your own what that story is? Great. If you can't, go find someone and ask for help. But talking about it is going to keep it there, right? Interacting with it, as I said, in quantum energy, if you observe something, it can change. If you just talk about it, it can't change as much as interacting or observing it. And then, as I said, somatics is a buzzword now. I've been working with somatics for, I don't know, 15, 20 years now. And it's a way of touching into your body's energy and your innate knowing. A lot of us know things about ourselves that we're not willing to admit. And the body holds on to those, right? The body holds on to those, particularly something I see a lot of in families. If there's a lie that was told, if there was, a baby given up for adoption that wasn't talked about, or some lie in the family that's never expressed, and then it comes out at the age of 60, it really has a rotting effect
Yeah.
on things. So if you know, or if you want to challenge your parents on things, just say, hey, I feel really hinky about this in my family. Is this a lie? Like, is something going on? Exposing those things can be so informing to people, and to say, wow, I've been holding on to that because I was lied to as a kid. Because we instinctively know when we're being lied to, right? And if your parents or family lied to you because it's a secret, that can be just horrible. One of my favorite movies is Secrets and Lies by Michael Lee as the director. It's an English film. Mike Lee, sorry. It's a prime example of keeping stuff in and seeing how that ultimately rots the organism. And that can be in your family tribe or just inside yourself. If you're misaligned or lying to yourself about something or wanting something that's unattainable, then it's going to cause a disconnect, and not in a good way. What I was talking about is, disassociating from things, not in a disassociating from the brain, but disconnecting to connect to yourself.
Okay. It's definitely food for thought. I think it's probably not for everyone. I think it's something that you've really got to think about and want to try. But I think there is a lot of benefits to it, and there are a lot of things for me that I think are better than talking therapy from my understanding of talking therapy, because it just to generalize again, it's like that core of masculinity is wanting to do and wanting to solve. It's very sort of that side of things, which I think is really, really quite useful. So yeah, for me, it was an interesting experiment. It was good fun. I personally got something out of it. Maybe other people get more out of it, and some people get less out of it. But there was definitely something. Which, with all this, and for me, it's like you've got to find what works for you, right? It's a case of
Exactly.
seeing what
Yeah.
works. And
Well, I started my practice.
no,
I I couldn't hear you. I started my practice in Manhattan, so I had a bunch of cynical New Yorkers coming and sitting with me. What is this? What are you going to do to me? Is this voodoo magic crap? What is going on here? And it really is. It's your experience. I read your energy back to you so you can understand it on a human level and then deal with it and find out where your kinks are and unkink them and let the energy in those hoses flow a little freer. That can be men with ED, that can be emotional issues, that can be you had a really horrible mother and you know it. One thing is really hard to accept for us is how bad our parents were. Now, we're not blaming them at this point because that's going to hurt the whole process, but acknowledging that they were bad and they were probably bad because their parents were bad, then you can sort of, as I said, detach from that story and start creating your own. It's an interesting point of view, and that's why I offered the session, because my work is somewhat ineffable. It's hard to describe. I can't just put this on my website and say, oh, you're going to cough energy up that's been stuck there since you were 9 because something happened to you. That's a bit hard to describe. So it really does come from people who have experienced it to be able to talk about it.
yeah,
And I appreciate you being so open about it.
yeah, it'd have been a different podcast if you were just telling me that. I'd have just been like, what's this guy on about? But no, it was, yeah, like, genuinely, I definitely got something out of it, which is the main thing, right? It's a good starting point. So,
Well, can you be a little more specific? Like, what did you get out of it? Because I don't like to. My work is hard to describe. So if you can describe it
yeah,
better than I can, because you had the experience, I was just observing it.
yeah. So like I felt something. I felt movement. We asked some strange questions that you probably don't think about at all, and it was like you have to answer it. It was like one of those sort of things, just answer the questions. As you asked me, we were looking for this energy, and we found it through just answering questions. And one of the questions was, when did it appear? And I was like 15, and I was like, where did that come from? Like I had no idea where the age of 15 had come from. And after it, I thought about it and sort of, again, sort of thought about it, and it gave me a rough idea and sort of, yeah, an understanding of why that age popped up and stuff like that, which was interesting. But again, it was just, for me, it was just talking in a different way. It was a way of essentially having therapy without having therapy, because it wasn't deep in the sense that we weren't going, and how did that make you feel? And like,
Exactly.
it was just a case of this. It was very factual, like this to this, and then in theory doing something about it. Obviously, that's an action within the session. The real work starts after, and you then obviously have to talk to yourself properly and have more conversations or do more sessions with Scott and sort of continue to build on that. I'm not going to be cured from one session, shall we say. But yeah, it was, you can feel stuff, which is good. Like you want that sort of response, don't you, when you're doing something?
Yeah, it's definitely a corporeal feeling as well. The somatics definitely play into it. Your pattern is explained back to you, but your body definitely responds when we do the work. I had a man just last week. He said, I'm feeling this, lack of power in myself, and I can't figure out why. And I said, oh, it's in your brain. And we did this energy thing about his brain and what the tightness that was feeling around his brain. And he said, I've noticed that on several levels, but I never, paid too much attention to it. Well, I said, what happened to you when you were 5? Did you change schools? Did you move across town when you were 5? Once again, my intuition sees that kink in your timeline. And he said, oh, yeah, we did move when we were 5. Moving when you're a child is a big factor because generally the child isn't brought into this situation. It's just done to them.
Yeah.
And so their power is taken away. So he had this situation, I think it was at work, where he felt like his power was being taken away. And this thing happened to his brain repeatedly. We traced it back to when his parents uprooted him and moved him to a different neighborhood where the school was different and his friends weren't the same and the yard was different. And he felt like his power was taken away. And now every time his power is taken away on some level, that pattern repeats itself to some degree or lets itself be known. And so we found it just within a matter of minutes because, that's the beauty of working with somebody who's an intuitive. I don't need the whole story. It really is, how is your body affected? And then let's find out why. Yeah. And that can happen fairly quickly, as you said, and then resolve it too. Now that resolution, as you said, creates other energy moving through your body differently. So it is to some degree about an upticking, but you really do want to observe yourself afterwards, as you said. I really liked that you said that.
Yeah. So if people have loved what they've heard, Scott, and they want to find you or find more about you, where's the best place to find you?
My website is scottclover.com, my name. There's testimonials on there, different aspects of what I do. And then my podcast, if you're interested in intuition and healing, is called the Intuitive Energy Podcast. And that's on all the...
Scott, thank you so much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. And thanks for being guest number 38 on the TRUUMAN.
I'm honored, Lewis. Thank you for your openness about this. This isn't always easy to talk about. So I'm glad that you offered yourself up like this. I think it's testimonial of what you're trying to put out in the world. And that's why I was happy you asked me to be involved with it, because I think it's important what you're doing. Tribe. I just want to finish up with this. Tribe is so important, and it's something we've lost. And as I said, we're becoming individuals now, but that individual still needs a tribe. You still need a gang. You still need your mates. You still need your posse, whatever you want to call it. Healing does happen in community, being seen by others, either authentically or the way you want to present yourself so you can change, is important. So try to go to that meetup or meet your friends up if they ask you. Try to not stay home on that one night you want to, because community does affect us favorably for the most part. And that sense of tribe can build up that lower body energy, as we talked about. So thanks again for having me on.
Amazing. Thank you.